on Japan's economy. My colleague Rachelle Akuffo spoke with Dan McClory earlier today. He's the managing director and head of China of Boustead Securities. They began by discussing the latest in Japan's manufacturing sector and what's driving it.
Well, for manufacturing, I mean, we're actually seeing things off just a bit. And I think what's driving it is kind of a COVID hangover. They really have not been able to, I don't think, come anywhere near what most G7 nations have done to address and then overcome it. Certainly not in terms of vaccination rates. So I think the economy is going to continue to be tentative, if not penalized for that, for some time.
So then as we look at the broader economy in Japan, what do you make of the health of the world's third largest economy?
Well, I think, frankly, given the fact that they knew for a decade they were hosting the Olympics, to have a less than 15% vaccination rate a month before, and they're up to about 33% now, it's just inexcusable. And it's almost as if they were trying not to get vaccinated. I mean, you have to try to not have to have that low of a vaccination rate. It's just implausible. So, I think that's one, storm cloud that's going to hang over Japan for quite some time, because as you're aware, the Olympics were seen to be, an economic stimulant to the economy, and now they've just gone in the complete opposite direction.
And certainly we saw that with the Olympics being postponed for another year, these additional costs, what is it going to take then to get Japan back on track?
I think that resurgence, Rachelle, is going to have to come from services and creative industries. The old line industrial, manufacturing, export-driven model is really difficult. And I'll give you an example. So, at Boustead Securities, we underwrite initial public offerings of companies. And we're working with a company from Tokyo called Hardcore. And this company, Hardcore, I mean, they're at the forefront of web content development. They're helping multinationals and companies inside of and outside of Japan really exploit their web assets. And I think there's a lot of creativity in Japan. There is a lot of value to be added, and we need to see more companies like that. It'll be a smallish transaction, maybe $100 million in total. But this is a direction I believe Japan needs to go, and not sort of the same old, same old.
Now, speaking of companies, we do know that a lot of national brands decided against advertising at the Olympics this year. Recap why that happened.
It was like darned if you do and darned if you don't. They committed to billions, literally billions, at the International Olympic Committee level and then the national level, and all of those stalwart names of corporate Japan. And then, because of the popular resistance to the Olympics, it became a public relations nightmare. And it was almost as if a corporate sponsor was seen as endorsing the Olympics, it may cause them to be looked at, in a negative way by their clients and potential customers. So most of them had to back off and pull the Olympic-oriented advertising. So they're spending lots of money for exposures and branding that they're not getting, and frankly, they don't want in a weird, strange way.
And since they have already spent some of this money, is there any other way they can capitalize on the investment they've already made in the games?
This is kind of the sticky wicket. If in fact the games are completed successfully, and if there's not new outbreaks, and if vaccination rates continue to climb, then there's a silver lining to what's going on with the Olympics. But so far, it's too early to make that call. There have been some increased outbreaks, in fact, which is not good. So I think if these corporate sponsors could be seen as having backed something that ultimately became successful, they could talk about it afterwards and kind of bask in that glow a little bit. But so far, there's not a glow, and there may not ever be one.
So then as you look ahead then after the games, what are you going to be watching for in the second half of the year with Japan's economy?
Yeah, I'd like to see a changeover, however gradual that may be, from old line industries like manufacturing and exporting to creative and service-driven industries, so much of which, apart from the infrastructure investment, the Olympics were in a position to provide. So I'd like to see them kind of get their mojo back in that regard and really show the world what they have to do creatively and how they can add a lot of value. For example, we spoke about our particular client and kind of all the things that they're doing at Hardcore. But I think that's what it's going to take. They've got to reimagine and represent themselves to the world.